Gentlemen, do you believe karma exists? The story of how karma caught up with an unfaithful wife. Let's hear it. Hello, my name is Nessie. I am 32 years old. Today, I want to share a deeply personal experience that arose after almost 14 years of living together with my husband. This story reflects my own experience and the consequences I faced after I betrayed my husband's trust by committing treason. He made the painful decision to break up with me. I found myself in a vulnerable position when I had to face the harsh reality of my actions. At that moment, I was trying to understand what made me make such a disastrous choice. It seemed to me that I was under the influence of a spell, unable to realize the depth of my actions. To my amazement, I discovered that I had entered into a relationship with a complete stranger whom I had first met at a social reception. I could not imagine myself capable of such behavior, especially in relation to my beloved husband. As an independent woman in my youth, I thrived as a freelance content writer, enjoying the flexibility of working from a cozy home and being able to freely manage my time. I often engaged in side projects and participated in various events. On one such occasion, I was engrossed in a writing assignment that required extensive research and preparation of materials. It was at this moment that a brilliant idea struck me like lightning. Blake Crouch's book, Dark Matter, seemed to me an ideal source of information to improve the quality of my project. Without hesitation, I made an impromptu decision to pay a visit to the local library. Despite diligent searches through library catalogs, my efforts were fruitless. I could not find the desired book. Disappointment began to creep into my soul, and I began to think about alternative solutions. When I was already heading for the exit, ready to leave the library, fate surprisingly intervened. At the moment when I was about to get into a taxi waiting for me, the very book that I had been looking for all day came into my field of vision. It was held in the hands of a good-natured gentleman who seemed to be absorbed in its pages. In an instant, I abandoned my previous decision to leave, overcoming an irresistible desire to take advantage of this unexpected opportunity. Without further hesitation, I approached the gentleman, driven by an unyielding determination to purchase the book I had been looking for so long. Smiling warmly, I approached the gentleman, noticing that he also reciprocated. I introduced myself as Nessie, and he kindly replied that his name was Michael. I couldn't resist telling him honestly about the reason that attracted me to him, about the book he was holding in his hands. It seemed funny to me, and he couldn't help but burst out laughing. Genuinely perplexed about my unusual attractiveness, curiosity flashed in his eyes, and he playfully asked why, out of all the things, I chose the book he was holding in his hands. In a joking tone, he suggested that I must be a real bookworm since I was so fascinated by his literary choice. Expressing my gratitude, I shared with him the disappointment caused by my long search for the book. To my surprise, he finished my sentence, admitting that he had encountered difficulties in searching. Our giggles intertwined, and a connection immediately formed between us. In the continuation of the conversation, he said that he would not be able to meet the person he had been waiting for. At that moment, he received a call and was told to continue to fulfill his plans for that day as they would agree on a more convenient meeting time. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he quickly decided to spend his newfound free time in my company, deciding instead to chat with me. Taking advantage of a spontaneous turn of events, we went to the nearest cafe attracted by the aroma of freshly made coffee and the promise to taste delicious scrambled eggs. As the conversation deepened, it became clear that we have many common interests. A pleasant discovery was that we both deeply love science fiction, prefer books over movies, and appreciate the simple pleasure of a cigarette over other forms of entertainment. In addition, our shared passion for mountains and nature has further strengthened our bond. Every moment, it became clear that a special affection had arisen between us. So, our journey together began. As a gesture of sincere kindness, he generously offered me the book, allowing me to keep it as long as I wanted. This small act of generosity became a symbolic gesture symbolizing the blossoming of romantic relationships that were waiting for us ahead on the pages of the book. I quickly gathered all the necessary information and completed the task in just 3 days. Surprised by my efficiency, he admired my dedication and skill, which further strengthened his love for me. Our relationship continued to develop, and for 2 years, our love grew stronger. In the end, we made a sincere decision to have a modest wedding surrounded by close people who occupied an important place in our lives. It was very important for us that these special people attended the wedding and celebrated our union. When our wedding day came, my heart was filled with joy. It was as if I was floating in the ninth heaven, grateful that these dear guests were present at our ceremony. It was undoubtedly one of the most unforgettable moments in my life, filled with love, happiness, and the promise of a wonderful future together. My dream is that we will continue to enjoy this excitement and turmoil throughout our lives. But the honeymoon came to an end, and the joyful memories of our wedding seemed to have evaporated when we were faced with the harsh reality of everyday married life and the many obstacles that accompanied it. Despite the pressure from relatives and detractors, we were left without children. We made a commitment to never lose sight of the glimmer of hope that flickered against the background of the difficulties we faced from year to year. Having decided to live happily, we remained optimistic and prayed for the best. Miraculously, shortly after celebrating our 4th wedding anniversary, I became pregnant, and a son appeared in our life. He brought us immense joy and became one of the greatest blessings in our lives. Despite the fact that we tried to expand our family and give him brothers and sisters, we were disappointed. No more children appeared. Nevertheless, we persisted in hoping. 11 years have passed since our wedding, and now one of my dearest friends is preparing to enter into a marriage union. To celebrate this significant event, we decided to arrange an exquisite bachelorette party in her honor. Our girl squad consisted of various married and unmarried women who came together to surprise her. As the long-awaited date approached, my excitement grew exponentially. Memories of my own bachelorette party came flooding back to me, reminding me of the delight and charm that filled the air. I couldn't help but wish my friend an even more magnificent and unusual experience. It was the day of the party, and I couldn't contain my excitement while doing my daily chores. Throughout the day, I didn't stop talking about the upcoming event. In the late afternoon, when it was time to go to the party, I found a minute to apply makeup while continuing to have a one-sided conversation about how excited I was about this event. It felt like I was talking to myself all the time. I couldn't help but notice Michael's complete lack of interest in the upcoming event. He seemed completely engrossed in his architectural drawings and didn't say a word. As I continued to talk about my excitement about the party, feeling disappointed, I walked over to his drawing table and tapped it lightly to get his attention. He looked at me through thick glasses and asked me to let him concentrate on his work. His answer disappointed me. After finishing my makeup and dressing for the occasion, I eagerly turned to him again, hoping to attract his attention and share my delight at how I looked. After a brief glance at me, he muttered a half-serious compliment, barely managing to utter a word, and returned to his drawings. I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me, and my self-esteem plummeted. I couldn't help but wonder why he wasn't interested in me or anything I could say. Resentment and disappointment began to consume me, but I quickly reminded myself that this evening was dedicated to the upcoming wedding of my best friend. I tried to put aside negative emotions and focus on the joy and fun that awaited us at the bachelorette party. I hurried upstairs to check on Mason, our son, informing him that I might be back late and advising him to eat and go to bed early. After kissing him gently on the forehead, I went downstairs to say goodbye to Michael and go to the party. Despite the fact that at first, I wanted to tell you about the venue of the holiday, which took place in a strip club, my friends dissuaded me from it. They believed that this would only cause unnecessary anxiety and potential tension, which I might not be able to cope with later. They stressed that the crucial point is that the bride and groom are aware and happy with the plan. Taking their advice to heart, I decided not to expand on the details. As agreed, a male candid dance was ordered for the entertainment of my best friend, and he was ready and waiting. The party started, and we plunged into an unforgettable experience. The music was loud, encouraging us to dance with each other, and a partially undressed dancer performed an individual number for the future bride. He danced with such passion and skill that some girls froze, fascinated by his performance. I couldn't look away either, feeling a blush appear on my cheeks. But my condition was dramatically disrupted when the dancer crossed the line and started touching me inappropriately. Reacting quickly, I pulled away from his touch and joined the other girls dancing around him. However, his gaze never left me throughout the dance. In the end, he sent me a discreet note asking me to meet him on the street. I told several of my friends about his courtship, and their reaction was laughter, prompting me to take further action. Suddenly, it seemed to me that my actions and choices depended on their approval or disapproval. This situation made me experience incredible fear. With trepidation, I went outside to meet him. He was standing in a white transparent shirt, showing off his impressive physique, wide chest, toned arms, and impressive abs. My gaze was fixed on him, and I couldn't take my eyes off him. He skillfully manipulated my emotions, persuading me to embrace, which I reluctantly succumbed to. At that moment, he resumed his inappropriate harassment and began to touch me, so that I stopped controlling myself. Before I knew it, we surrendered to our desires, quenching the insatiable thirst in both of us. When he shared his contact details and asked me to contact him when I wanted his presence, I was struck like lightning by the realization that I had just betrayed my husband. Overwhelmed with sadness and a sense of deep uncertainty, I got lost in a sea of conflicting emotions. I immediately refused his offer, deciding to put him out of my mind. I threw away his contact details, promising myself never to repeat such a mistake. But despite everything, he reappeared in my life, and we started a full-fledged romance. Our secret meetings took place in an inconspicuous hotel in the city, where we repeatedly met. Every time our meeting ended, I was overcome by a wave of guilt, and I felt complete mental emptiness and remorse for the rest of the day. But strangely enough, despite the depth of my despair, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't resist his persistent courtship and succumb to the temptation to enter into intimacy with him. In his presence, I experienced a heady mixture of approval and excitement, which was hard to resist. It was an unthinkable scenario. I'm cheating on my husband with a dancer I met at a bachelorette party. The situation was obscene and unthinkable. Despite all my attempts to end this forbidden relationship, the more I struggled, the deeper I got into it. The only consolation was the hope that my husband, Michael, would never find out the truth. But the possibility of hiding the truth haunted me. As the intrigue continued, doubts gnawing at me incessantly. Inevitably, the day came when we planned to visit one of the elite restaurants of the city. It was a serene and radiant Thursday evening. My husband was absorbed in his work, diligently creating numerous drawings for an impatient client who was due to arrive the next day. At that time, our son was happy on the playground, passionate about playing football. Taking advantage of a convenient moment, I slipped away unnoticed on a date with my illegal lover. When we sat opposite each other and enjoyed dinner, it seemed that time had stopped, allowing us to forget about the consequences of our actions for a while. Over time, our relationship became stronger and stronger, developing into a deep romance in which we were comfortable sharing intimate details, including problems in my marriage. I told him about the first days of our union when I gave my husband boundless love and care. I devoted myself to his happiness, often putting his needs above my own. But over time, I began to feel deprived of attention and abandoned by him. Despite all my efforts, it seemed that my contribution to the well-being of our family was not appreciated and not recognized. While I poured out my soul, my lover carefully absorbed every word. He squeezed my hands tightly and looked into my eyes, assuring me that he understood all the pain I was experiencing. At this vulnerable moment, he bent down and kissed me on the lips, causing a surge of desire in me. But the stares of others reminded me of the consequences and forced me to restrain myself. Closing my eyes, I enjoyed this short-term connection and suddenly felt him pull away, breaking out of my grip. My heart sank when I saw Michael, my husband, grab him tightly by the collar. Shock swept through my veins. I was paralyzed and didn't know what to do next. How did Michael find out about our visit to the restaurant? His furious gaze, full of anger and resentment, pierced through me. He turned to me, there was disappointment in his voice, and he asked if this was the friend who, as I claimed, was going through a difficult breakup and needed my emotional support. It was the same lie that I repeatedly justified my secret meetings with my lover. When I met his angry gaze, my heart sank with remorse and regret. Realizing the urgency of the situation, I knew I had to act quickly before his anger consumed me completely. The thought of cheating flashed through my head, but to my amazement, Michael abruptly released my lover and swiftly approached me. His grip on my shoulders tightened, his face contorted with rage, and he looked like a formidable monster ready to devour me whole. In a thunderous voice, he demanded an immediate explanation of the reasons for my connection with my lover, threatening consequences that seemed too real. Fear gripped me when I realized the seriousness of his words. I had no choice but to let my tears run wild. Guilt weighed heavily on me, and I couldn't hide anything from him. I plucked up the courage and confessed everything, but his reaction was full of anger, and he hit me hard in the face. Seeing this, my lover intervened, trying to prevent further conflict. As a result, a violent altercation ensued between them. The atmosphere in the restaurant instantly changed, a real hurricane raged around us. In a fit of anger, Michael grabbed a champagne bottle and hit my lover on the head with all his might. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the hall, causing everyone to freeze in fear. Some visitors tried to find shelter, while others hurriedly ran away from the scene, trying to ensure their safety. Eyewitnesses tried to intervene, pleading with voices to stop, but no one dared to approach the fight for fear of becoming its victim. With a strong push, Michael knocked my already traumatized lover to the ground and, leaving him there, coldly left. He made it clear that he did not intend to discuss or admit what had happened. I tried desperately to explain myself, but my attempts were ignored. I couldn't help but wonder what he was cooking for me. Deep down, I knew that he would avenge my betrayal, but what exactly remained a mystery. I waited anxiously for the inevitable, holding my breath in anticipation of the impending storm. Exactly a month later, Michael handed me the divorce papers, clearly reminding me of the consequences of my actions. He demanded that I leave the house immediately. Despite my hesitation, he forcibly pushed me out of the house, throwing my things over the threshold. Having no other choice, I packed my things and reluctantly went to my uncle, a man known for his excessive cruelty. Because of his penchant for cruelty, he divorced his wife, and the children eventually drifted away from him. Unfortunately, I ended up under his care. When I arrived at his house, I was greeted by a sight that did not leave me indifferent. He looked completely intoxicated, his gaze was riveted on me as if I was a stranger in his eyes. Concerned about my presence, he asked why I had come to him. As a matter of urgency, he demanded that I quickly enter the house and close the doors behind me. Knowing about his changeable nature and inclinations, I did everything possible to avoid clashes with him, but my efforts were in vain. He purposefully looked for flaws where there were none, as a result of which, within a week of my arrival, he hit me twice. One day, he came home intoxicated and found me sitting innocently in the living room. When he entered the house, thoughts flashed through my head about how to regain my balance and return to my work as a freelancer. I smiled hopefully and greeted him, but his lack of response caught my attention. Assuming he didn't hear me, I repeated my greeting, but he warned me not to insult him. Perplexed, I tried to explain that it was just a friendly greeting, but then he flew into a rage. Instinctively, I rushed to the door, desperately trying to find shelter in the nearest neighborhood. But my escape failed as I realized that he had locked the door with a key, pinning me inside with his continuous swearing. Under continuous shouts, he repeatedly accused me of having a bad reputation. He perceived me as another woman who had entered his life and made it unbearable, adding to the frustrations he had experienced with his ex-wife and previous partners. In a panic, I ran into the room, hurriedly closed, and consoled myself with the fact that I had a phone with me. Trembling, I took it out of my pocket and dialed my ex-husband's number, desperately asking him for help. I laid out all the details of the terrible situation in which I found myself, begging him to come to the rescue. To my horror, his response was cold and dismissive. He callously said that it was not within his competence and abruptly interrupted the conversation. Experiencing a deep sense of hopelessness, I came to realize that I had reached my limit. There was no one around to offer me salvation, and I had to make a difficult decision. I decided to stay still and wait, hoping that eventually, he would go to bed or go outside for a drink. In this fleeting moment, I would take the chance to escape from his clutches forever, even if it means seeking shelter under bridges. For what seemed like an eternity, I I did not move from my place, immersed in thoughts about which path my life had chosen. Almost 2 hours had passed when I noticed an eerie silence enveloping everything around, which was the signal that it was time to run. Believing that he was asleep or busy with something, I cautiously opened the door. My heart was pounding in my chest. Stepping carefully, I tiptoed into the living room, deciding to quickly pack my things. The weight of the items turned out to be too heavy to carry them all at once, so I selected the most necessary, leaving the rest. Quietly passing through the living room, I headed down the corridor to the exit door. When I approached, I noticed that he had fallen asleep, stretched out on the floor, waiting for me to leave. As soon as my footsteps reached his ears, grabbing my shoe tightly, he pulled me forcefully against the wall, completely ignoring my words. When he was dragging me, I lost my balance and fell to the floor. Overcome with anger, he callously stepped on me and repeated this action until I lost consciousness. Sprawled on the cold floor, the details of how I got there did not escape me, but somehow I found myself chained to a hospital bed for several months. The pain he caused me led to a serious spinal injury and dislocation of several rib bones, as a result of which I will no longer be able to stand on my feet. The suffering from his act put a lot of pressure on me. The doctors diligently tried to restore my physical health, but despite all their efforts, I will not be able to regain my former physical strength. 2 months after the ordeal, I was finally discharged from the hospital, but the ability to stand on my feet and walk never recovered. I couldn't stand on my feet for more than a few seconds, as it became unbearably painful. During my stay in the hospital, Michael arranged to visit our son through the mediation of his younger sister. I was overwhelmed with guilt and disappointment because of my absence from his life. The thought of how he would feel when he grew up, knowing that the reason for my separation from Michael was my own betrayal, weighed on my heart. At the same time, I couldn't help but think about how deplorable my current condition had become, and this prompted me to immerse myself in memories of how it all began. I understood that none of this would have happened if I had not reneged on my obligations to Michael. But at the same time, I realized that the blame could not lie solely on my shoulders. If he had treated me with the care and love that I deserved, satisfying my needs for attention and affection, I would not have been left out of our relationship. It was the lack of love and emotional fulfillment that made me vulnerable, seeking solace elsewhere. Overwhelmed with heartache, I succumbed to the impulse and sent Michael a message in which I expressed my disappointment. I asked him head-on if he found satisfaction in my hospitalization. I pointed out his constant absence, emphasizing that his unwillingness to visit me during my stay in the hospital only strengthened my confidence that he did not feel sincere concern for me. I told him about his negligent attitude towards the upbringing of our son. It was obvious that the lack of attention and affection on his part led to the fact that our child began to look for confirmation elsewhere. I told him the sad news that our son began to show kleptomaniac tendencies, resorting to stealing from his peers. Most recently, he was caught red-handed when he was taking cookies and biscuits from classmates. I called Michael to account, emphasizing that his actions or lack thereof played a significant role in this misconduct. But I couldn't help but admit my own remorse for having played a part in this unpleasant situation. After this incident, the person with whom I had an affair also ended up in the hospital. Unfortunately, after discharge, he permanently lost his hearing in his left ear. Although we continue to communicate, our connection has never gone beyond that. I deeply regret betraying Michael and having an affair with him. Remembering that ill-fated day of my girlfriend's bachelorette party, I understand how stupidly I acted. When the dancer realized that we all claimed his attention, he boldly decorated his chest with a portion of whipped cream, encouraging us to consume them while dancing. He caused a stir among the unmarried ladies, attracting them to him like bees to honey. Despite the temptation, I restrained myself, knowing full well that marital obligations forbid such actions. But my friends, among whom there were married ones, persuaded me to participate. They assured me that they themselves had indulged in similar pursuits more than once. Despite a deep sense of anxiety, the persistent persuasions of friends and the mesmerizing presence of the dancer got the better of my common sense. Under their persistent persuasion, I reluctantly succumbed to their persuasions and took part in the action. And eventually, I cheated on my husband. I will never forgive myself for such a cruel act. And the fact that I will never be able to move around again without the help of a wheelchair is my own fault. Karma descended instantly, for which I will suffer for the rest of my life. Story 2. At the age of 16, Billy founded his band Green Day, following in the footsteps of many famous punk singers who also created their own bands in their teens. Unlike him, my own musical journey began at the age of 19 when I teamed up with my best friend and 4 other like-minded people. Driven by a shared love of music, we joined together and formed a band. It is worth noting that my upbringing was far from simple, and in the past, I was involved in minor criminal offenses. Music played an important role in helping me get rid of the problems of the past. For me, it wasn't about money or fame. On the contrary, my dream was to follow in the footsteps of the musicians I idolized. During my difficult upbringing, the passion for music lived deep within me, and I am proud to hone my skills on all the instruments that I come across. With unwavering determination, we made a firm plan and set off on a musical journey. We firmly believed that success was our destiny and enjoyed carefree days, communicating with charming girlfriends and liberating ourselves from backbreaking responsibilities. Making a name for ourselves on the music scene, especially performing concerts in bars, became a means of earning money for us. Maybe our life was not extravagant, but it gave us enough funds to satisfy our ambitions. We knew that countless talented musicians had paved their way to success by following exactly this path. With hope and determination, we were immersed in our favorite business. Suddenly, tragedy struck when my girlfriend got pregnant. This was a shocking discovery because she had assured me that she was using contraceptives. But later, I found out that she deliberately stopped taking them to lure me into the trap of fatherhood. No matter how much I cherished my musical aspirations, I could not ignore the harsh reality. My current income was insufficient to support a child and my girlfriend. If our child appeared before the band reached its long-awaited breakthrough, then I knew that I would have to make a difficult decision to curtail my musical quest and focus on providing for my growing family. Shortly after my girlfriend deliberately trapped me with her pregnancy, I ran into another problem. My best friend came to the rehearsal late, overwhelmed with joy, and excitedly said that his girlfriend was also expecting a baby. Despite my best friend not being the smartest person, his infectious cheerfulness and benevolence were among his most pleasant qualities. But sometimes, his frivolity prevented him from fully realizing the consequences and responsibilities associated with the appearance of a child. At this crucial stage of our musical career, it was increasingly difficult for me to explain to my best friend the seriousness of the situation. Despite all my attempts to convey the consequences of our friends' pregnancies, I could not shake off a strong resentment against my friend for his girlfriend's cunning plan. I felt trapped, unable to end this relationship because of the possible legal consequences associated with the payment of alimony. 9 months later, my girlfriend gave birth to our son, which coincided with the birth of my best friend's child by his girlfriend. Around the same time, my best friend's girlfriend gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Unlike me, my best friend radiated pure joy and excitement at becoming a father. He even immortalized this event by making a tattoo with the image of his daughter and the year of her birth. Although I cherished my newborn son with all my heart, I could not compare with him in terms of enthusiasm for fatherhood. Deep down, I really wanted my child to have a better life filled with comfort and opportunities that surpassed the difficulties I faced. But at that moment, I didn't know how to cope with the difficulties that both I and my family had to overcome. Thinking about the future, I realized that I was not able to offer my son the life I wanted for him. This realization only strengthened my confidence that my girlfriend had deliberately destroyed my dreams by luring me into a trap with her deceptive actions, reneging on our agreement, and stopping the use of contraceptives. I admit that my son is not to blame for the predicament I find myself in. Nevertheless, I had to make difficult choices, including reducing the time of music lessons in an effort to ensure financial stability. I made a difficult decision to give preference to a stable job rather than a musical career. Our group had not yet achieved the breakthrough we had hoped for, and I simply did not have the means to support the child and my girlfriend. The expenses associated with the newborn only exacerbated the tension that we were already experiencing. Unfortunately, as the activity of our group decreased and our income decreased, the dedication and commitment of the band members began to weaken. Gradually, we began to lose valuable band members, and finding a worthy replacement for them turned out to be a difficult task. It became obvious that it was unrealistic to expect changes from a person just for the sake of the group. Endless waiting for improvements can lead to an endless circle of disappointments. Moreover, investing precious time and resources in band members experiencing problems with synchronization, tuning, attendance, reading notes, or interpersonal conflicts significantly slowed down the process of creating music and had a detrimental effect on all participants, including the participants themselves. Experiencing problems, I used to believe that support, encouragement, and time could stimulate a participant's commitment to the group. But now, I realize that there are limitations in such circumstances. I have come to understand that trying to adjust the playing style, genre preferences, or abilities of a particular band member is a useless approach that ultimately leads to failure. It is not productive to force someone to become what he or I want if he is not ready to invest the necessary time and effort for the successful functioning of the group. The overwhelming stress of trying to balance everything led me to make the difficult decision to disband the band. As a result, I began to be tormented by painful thoughts about missed opportunities. And all because my girlfriend thought that I would leave her if I achieved fame. Subsequently, my best friend and I got a job at a car factory, leaving behind our musical aspirations and ambitions. It was a life devoid of music and passion. But when my friend saw how worried I was about fatherhood, she began to understand that my actions were dictated by a sense of duty and responsibility, not sincere passion. Realizing this, she sincerely apologized and began to treat me with caution. Realizing how important it is to be attentive, despite all the misunderstandings, I still love her and believe that she is a good person. I hoped she understood that I would have stayed by her side even if I had achieved fame, and therefore the decision to trap me with a child was unnecessary. When my dream of becoming a musician became unattainable, I had to reconsider my desires and adopt a blue-collar lifestyle in the suburbs. Surprisingly, now I find joy in arranging meetings and creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere for others in my backyard. I am happy to arrange gatherings where I can demonstrate my musical abilities. One of the memorable occasions was a barbecue organized by me, to which I invited friends and relatives. Among the guests, I asked my best friend to bring his family since our children are the same age. Although I didn't know my friend's girlfriend very well, I had heard rumors about her short temper. Unfortunately, during her visit to my house, she showed an irrepressible habit of criticizing my best friend and seemed to not pay attention to her own daughter. At the same time, throughout all these gatherings, it was my best friend who took care of the baby, constantly looking after her. Observing such dynamics, I couldn't help but admire how my friend tried hard to be a good father. Although it often seemed that he was being ordered personally, I would not tolerate such disrespect from my girlfriend. Realizing that he was being mistreated, I advised my friend not to let his girlfriend treat him like that, especially in front of other people. But he, as a kind-hearted person, tried to hush up the situation and pretend that everything was fine. The relationship between my friend and his girlfriend, in my opinion, was toxic. I often noticed that my friend came to work with noticeable scratches on his face and bruises, which bothered me a lot. I was sure that he should think about leaving his girlfriend as the situation could escalate into domestic abuse. It was an issue that could lead to imprisonment or even worse, endanger a person's life. About 18 months after I became a father, my friend suddenly disappeared from work. At first, I assumed he might be sick. At first, I did not attach importance to the absence of a friend. When he did not show up for work the next day, considering that we worked in different departments, I was not aware of all the events. Nevertheless, I decided to contact him and call him. But he does not answer the calls. 3 more days passed, and I managed to find out his girlfriend's number through my friend and call her. To my complete shock, she informed me that my friend had been arrested by the police. To my bewilderment, she filed a domestic crime report against him, accusing him of assaulting their 18-month-old daughter. Having difficulty digesting this information, I decided to check the truth by going to the district's website. To my horror, I found out that he was indeed in the county jail, and the charges were listed there. Not wanting to believe in the veracity of the situation, deciding to support my friend, I went to prison to visit him. but when I arrived there, I found out that my friend had been taken to the hospital due to the nature of his crimes involving his own daughter. Another inmate attacked him in prison, leaving me in a state of shock and devastation. The reality of what happened was beyond my comprehension. Having decided to support my friend, I returned to prison the following week and was completely shocked by his appearance. He was unrecognizable, and there were scars on his body from the brutal beatings he had been subjected to after his arrest. The once cheerful and always smiling friend I knew had changed. At that moment, I forced a smile with difficulty, and immediately, a full explanation of the reason came. All his front teeth were missing. He began to tell about the terrible event that led him to such a state. It all started with a heated argument between him and his girlfriend caused by her constant struggle with addiction to illegal drugs and her financial problems. Although we both had a past related to this, we consciously decided to abandon this pernicious path when we left the band. During their quarrel, the tension escalated, and she resorted to physical influence on him. In a moment of uncontrollable anger, he reacted in such a way that he now regrets it very much. Unaware of this, she was determined for him to be punished and immediately called the police, falsely accusing him not only of assaulting her but also their 18-month-old daughter, whom I knew as Willie. The gravity of the situation became apparent when he was quickly arrested, and to my horror, bail was not posted, leaving him trapped in a system that seemed intent on ensuring his suffering. The gravity of the situation overwhelmed me. I felt deep sadness and boiling anger at the unfair relationship in which my friend was. Seeing that he was in such a state tore my heart, and I had a glimmer of hope that the truth would eventually prevail and give him the opportunity to find the necessary support and recover. The thought of him dying behind prison walls was unbearable. Driven by a deep sense of loyalty and care, I made the decision to use my savings. Deciding to act, I turned to an experienced and competent lawyer, realizing that his experience would be crucial for navigating the legal system and obtaining the judge's consent to bail. It was a risk, but I was ready to take it so that my friend would not remain languishing in prison but would get a chance for justice and a path to recovery. After my injured friend was released from prison, I kindly offered him to stay with me. Clearly being impressed by what he had experienced, most of all he worried about his baby. Recognizing that his girlfriend does not have enough abilities and knowledge to perform the duties of a caring mother, sympathizing with his experiences, we jointly decided to contact the Child Protection Service to ensure the child's well-being. During the inspection, it turned out that the child lives in disgusting conditions. As a result, it was decided to intervene and remove the child from the custody of my friend's girlfriend. Temporary custody was granted to her parents, but to my horror, they also sided with her, unfairly accusing that my friend was unworthy of their daughter. When we attended the court hearings on the fabricated assault case, it quickly became clear that the charges were absolutely false. Shockingly, it was discovered that the girlfriend had overstated her testimony, falsely claiming that she had witnessed his inappropriate actions with their own daughter. The situation associated with false accusations of inappropriate behavior of my friend is undoubtedly upsetting and outrageous. It serves as a vivid reminder that justice must prevail. To see what a huge imprint this event has made on my friend's life and his relationship with the child is both heartache and deep anxiety. Fortunately, a thorough medical examination showed that these actions were impossible, and the case collapsed under the weight of evidence. It was irrefutably proved that the charges were falsified. My friend went through the hardest ordeal of being wrongfully imprisoned for 45 days, during which he suffered from injuries inflicted by his cellmates who mistakenly believed that he had harmed his own daughter. As a result, he lost his job and was left without means of livelihood in a state of poverty. The judicial system thoughtlessly ignored any accusations against the mother, as a result of which my friend felt abandoned and betrayed. There was a feeling that they were expressing indifference, refusing to acknowledge the enormous suffering that he had endured. The consequences of a false accusation for my friend's life are difficult to describe, but the fact that his girlfriend was not brought to justice for her false statements cannot but worry. The obvious injustice made us think about the inequality in relation to the false accusations made by women against men. Such unequal treatment only strengthens the belief of some women that they can blame men with impunity. Such disappointments and unfairness aggravated the already difficult situation in which my friend found himself. Nevertheless, despite all the difficulties, he continued to struggle. Despite all the difficulties, my friend has retained an amazing positivity and hope for the possibility of reuniting with his daughter and restoring the destroyed family. He persevered in restoring stability, diligently sought work, and stubbornly sought the right to visit so as not to lose touch with his beloved child. But against the background of his decisive actions, the situation took an extremely unpleasant turn when the mother suddenly began to insist that his daughter did not biologically belong to him. This unexpected turn brought an already difficult situation to a new level of complexity, forcing my friend to remain in a state of uncertainty and emotional turmoil. Driven by the desire to find out the truth and end the deception of his girlfriend, my friend insisted on conducting a DNA test. The results of the paternity test shocked us all. It turned out that he was not the biological father of the girl whom he sincerely considered his daughter. Experiencing heartache, he lost custody of the child he loved and took care of all the time of their life together. Unfortunately, the mother did not suffer any legal consequences for her actions, as this was apparently a constant theme of their toxic relationship. After this tragic discovery, my friend's life became terrible. He became gloomy and anxious. Having failed to find a job and repeatedly failed tests for the use of prohibited substances, my friend found himself on a disastrous path. The lack of financial stability pushed him to seek solace in dangerous substances, which led to a reapproach with a pernicious circle of people. Gradually, he disappeared into the shadow of the city, occasionally flashing in moments of homelessness. Having become only a shadow of his former self, he was painfully aware that he was in a state of deep mental disorder. I received the terrible news that my close friend tragically died from an excessive dose of banned substances, leaving his body useless to anyone. As a result, I had to gather a small group of family and friends to pray and sorrowfully say goodbye to him. The loss of a beloved friend was a deep and painful blow for everyone to whom he was dear. After a while, I unexpectedly met his ex-girlfriend at a Walmart store, and it was unpleasant for me to see how she deteriorated in everything. Huge bruises under her eyes indicated that she continued to use illegal drugs. She was standing on the ground at the exit of the store, begging for alms. As it turned out, the child was not given to her because of her addiction and financial situation, and besides, she could no longer pay for the rent of the house. The sight served as a bitter reminder of the pain and suffering she had caused. The injustice and tragedy in my friend's life served as a vivid reminder of the injustice that could befall us.